Hey everybody, Nick Marzock with Full Compass. We are so privileged to have with us two individuals that are on the current Young the Giant tour doing sound engineering. We have Lloyd Williams and we have Connor Hawkins. I want to start with you, Lloyd, and get right down to it. Let's talk about how you come up in this business, because you end up with such a huge responsibility. You are the last thing before the sound hits the audience ears. What's the progression? How do you evolve into that? Because you've been on some major tours, including the one you're on currently.
It's a privilege. It's a really cool position. First and foremost, Connor does front of house as well. The short version is I came out of college and wanted to work in a studio, and told by a lot of people studios are on their way out, so you should maybe get into the live field. Fortunately got a job at an incredible production company in the UK called Scan PA, who still is active right now. And I ended up being a systems tech, flying PA in theaters, arenas, stadiums for 15 years-ish, looking after some of the best tours and engineers in the world as a system technician, making sure the PA sounded good and putting it in the venue every day. And through that process, long story short, I got to look after some of the best engineers in the world. No matter if the tour was small or big, I would learn something from them. I was looking over their shoulder the whole time, because being an engineer is very different than putting a PA in the sky and making that sound good, because to your point, front of house, last line of defense, the last thing that everybody hears in the crowd. And the thing about sound, especially in a live space, is it's incredibly subjective. Every single person has an opinion.
So PVRIS against the current, now you're with Young the Giant, The Fray. These are major acts. Is there a difference that you're experiencing now, like band to band? Is it, what are the through lines? What's different about Young the Giant, particularly right now?
There are different levels of detail that every artist that I work with has and takes into consideration on a stage. Some of them are very loose. Some of them are just pick up a guitar and go do a show, and I'll just, make it, it's fine. Or, we trust you. And then there's other people who are very involved in the detail. Not only are they very, very smart guys. They've been doing this for a very long time. They've gone through a lot of career over the years as well. So they care about the audio quality, not only front of house, but on stage as well. And, that comes down to the gear that we choose as well. And we talk to them about these kind of decisions that we're making. And at the end of the day, they kind of trust it.
And so moving on to you, Connor, you're not escaping this. You started off as front of house engineer. How did you get into this? How did you get into sound engineering and that responsibility?
Similarly, I was in school for studio production, and I think towards the end of my degree, I was realizing how much time it was going to be in a dark room every day. Grew up going to festivals like Bonnaroo, and made the decision there that I was like, wait a minute, I can apply this in the same sense, but I can be in a different space every day and see the world and do that sort of thing. So I went through a program called the Music Industry Recording Arts program at St. Petersburg College.
Oh, wonderful, yeah.
Part of my job became, because I'd graduated, was teaching some of the interns that were coming through the program as well. Started working for some local bands back home, did a couple short tours, which, led to making connections and meeting a manager or two here and there, and started at front of house, which was great. And I was very grateful for that, because that was the position. It was like, oh, you work towards that. I had been offered a couple monitor gigs over the years, but to be honest with you, I was terrified of that position.
Why were you terrified? What was the
out front, I had confidence in my own mix, making things sound as best as I could to my ear. But being on stage was like, oh, it's not my mix, it's the band's mix. It was a much hotter seat in my mind. A couple of years ago, I had the privilege of getting the offer to work for the Mars Volta, but it was a monitor's position, and it's one of those things that, I grew up listening to that band. They're one of my all-time favorites, and you don't say no to the Mars Volta when they call and ask you to work for them. So it put me in an uncomfortable spot, but I couldn't have been more stoked that I jumped in and went for it, because I got to experience a whole nother sense of fulfillment out of my job. I had kind of put myself in a box at front of house, and I was like, this is my workflow, this is what I do. It's been refreshing to be at the other end of the snake, and the band comes off and they come up to me and go, man, I had a great show, like, thanks. And that's way different than, a couple of people at front of house after the show going, man, it sounded sick. It's like, yeah, thanks, bud.
You brought up Mars Volta and doing that's so different than Young the Giant. And that kind of brings me to, even the Young and the Giant themselves, like from their first album, I think it was 2010, now into American Bollywood, like the sound has changed and evolved. How are you splitting the difference almost? Like if you take a drum sound, like what the American Bollywood or Mirror Master, you know, that sound is going to be so much different than their early stuff. What's your process, I guess, with trying to dial that in?
Great question. Yeah. You know, I think that when I came in, I have a very specific like rock style that I mix at. I want my drums to sound like that. I want my guitars and my vocal to sound like this. So that's what I'm going to do. When it comes to tailoring it to what the band's expectations are and like some creative things that they want, it all comes down to effects for me. Like that can completely shift the tone and the age of the song as well. You know, they have certain songs that have some tracks involved with some of the newer records, that real percussion.
As you say now, Indian elements in there.
Yeah, so we have some of that in the track. And then we go all the way back to the first record, which was an indie rock, like hunk indie like sound, where it's literally just drums, bass, 2 guitars and a vocal.
And processing on that vocal, that kind of slap early, like,
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like going from something like that ages a song and gives it a certain tone without changing the overall dynamics of the entire mix, where you still wanted to have that power all the way through. I do like to keep things very consistent from start to finish. On a live front, I try not to change too much EQ of what's happening, but I do change effects every single song very, very heavily to match as close to the record as possible.
So I want to get into the gear because you both are using different boards, but there's a through line in the card, if I'm not mistaken, because you're on LV1s. So that makes it super easy, I would guess, to recall like per song. You're pre-fader, correct? The signal that you're getting?
So I'm on D Live. Lloyd's on LV1. We're using snapshots, you know, and we each have our own set of snapshots from song to song. Mine are much more level based, not so much effects based, such as Lloyd. He has level changes as well, but for me, it's, you know, like I said, like it's about what the guys need to hear to do their job. We're basically sharing a stage rack, and we use all the same preamps. Our gains are shared. You know, some people think of it as a bad thing, you know, that, oh, I don't have control over my head amps, but we both have digital trim. And I found that working at the level we're working at, it's rare that I have somebody else at the other end of the snake that I don't have the same audio mentality and principles. We're seeing the same levels, and when something's off, if he doesn't catch it, I catch it. If I don't catch it, he catches it. Every day during line check, I mean, if something's 2 dB off, we both recognize it, or want, you know, like it's something we're talking about.
So in terms of processing, if there is like a more vintage or more ethereal sound on this song, are you doing that independently of what he's doing?
We are fully independent as far as, you know, what's happening on my desk and his desk. It's just that the source we are sharing.
So let's get into the source. So you're on LV1s, and you have an LV1 card.
I have a Waves V3 card in my DM0 mix rack by Alan Heath, and I have a CTI 1500 that I'm using. We have been very fortunate to get to play around some of the Ionic 16s on this tour. We're sharing all the inputs.
Every input's going into an Ionic?
Yep.
On this, wow.
Yep. I utilize the majority of the outputs for our IEMs, you know, drum sub, our key sub, side fills. If Lloyd needed to send a broadcast mix out that rack from front of house to stage, we've got that capability. He is our sound grid host. When we power up at LV1, he sees my card. He sees the Ionics, he sees his LV1, and you know, he kind of handles the architecture for our patch.
Does the band have preferred in-ear monitors, or is that, do you have in-ear monitors that you recommend?
So the band are all on UE Lives. I currently mix on 64 Audio H12Ts. I've had that pair for a long time. I know them very well.
Obviously a full compass, you know, I love getting into the gear and like talking about what are your monitoring headphones? What are you using for that?
Oh man, I'm using Sennheiser HD25 Mark IIs, which I've been using for 25
years. Same as well when I'm at front of house.
No way.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what is it? Is it just is it the honesty, or do you like the certain sound profile of them?
That's a really good question. They're actually not the most flat headphones, but that's intentional, because if you think about when you're mixing in a PA in a big room, you want a little bit more low end because there's a ton of subs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A little bit more of like the mids, highs. So they are a little bit more shaped than neutral headphones. But I find personally, I'm sure you find the same thing, it's kind of like the transition between on and off. For me, after using them, especially for so long, it's like they are.
One of my favorite features is the swivel one side.
This could make or break, that's and so then getting into gear, what brought you to LV1? Because this is, obviously there's a new LV1 Classic coming out, but what initially got you into the LV1 system from Waves?
It was working on some fly shows with Against Current after COVID. They were coming back to do their first shows of the year. Those guys, specifically Dan, the guitarist, cares a lot about audio, and he's kind of wants that consistency. So it was, I was on tour, finishing a tour with Trixie Mattel at the time, and he goes, we want to buy a console. What do we want to do? I've done some research. I found this Waves have got this thing, and I kind of have this quick look on on this plane that I'm on. I'm like, I don't know. What do you think? Well, let's do the Waves one because we already own all the licenses for the plugins. And then I show up in rehearsals like the next day, and all the components are there, and we build a rack, and we have a day until the next show. So the band is playing for a day with no show file or anything, and ported over my Avid profile show file, the way that I was mixing on that show file over onto the LV1, just because it was all I knew how to do really in that time, groups and effects and everything, to try and replicate it as close as possible. But in like a show, I had like a really good file. Yeah. And it was kind of like, wow, it just works. And then fortunate enough to have the support from Waves over the years. Across some festivals that we did with Young the Giant this season so far, two really good old friends of mine who I've not seen for years showed up. Jim Warren, a good friend of mine who I toured with on Radiohead, he showed up there. He was doing Arcade Fire, and he was walking up to front of house, and he's just like, you did that with that? Yeah. And he's over here with his Avid S6L that's 16 times the size, his 3 outboard racks, and he looks at me and he goes, how?
So what are you excited about with the LV1 Classic coming up?
Being able to have this thing in one case and just go out, click, click, load my show file, and off it goes. Like, I've no problem with the modular stuff. In fact, in a way, it's kind of fun sometimes to dig into the back and be like, oh, I wonder if I could upgrade this and this and this. But it kind of comes to a point where that's longevity and like durability that you need from like an actual console. And the cases that I've been using for the modular LV1 is like amazing. It was with Circle 3 for a while. Now I'm using the OCD case. Great job of making a custom case that looks and feels like a real console. But that's what they were all doing, trying to emulate what this is. They were trying to emulate a feel of a console. Yeah. So this next step for them is pretty exciting.
Real quickly for both of you, because I know you guys got to go set up for a show tonight. From different perspectives, so front of house, and you'll be the monitor perspective, what's the best way to like dial in quickly and get things consistent from show to show?
On a tour of this scale that we're on, we're fortunate to be touring with the PA. So we have the same PA every day. So there's an automatic consistency there. It's the room that then changes and the temperature that changes. Like for me, it's still about really putting on my PA tune songs that I've been listening to for literally 15 years now. I've used the same songs every day. Connor has the same song. A lot of engineers have the same songs. Doing a quick tune, quick EQ, hopefully it's not too much. Again, there's a consistency with a PA that exists that's the same one every day. Running my tracks, doing a quick virtual, it's like, does that sound pretty close to normal? Yeah, it does. And having the confidence in your file as well is a huge part of it as well. So I'm not kind of like going around in circles. It's like, I know my file is good. I know what it sounds like every single day. I know what it should sound like through any PA at all.
And then same question to you, but now it's like, how much is there a difference because everyone's in here?
All those microphones are, picking up the sound of that stage. So especially in these amphitheaters, it's, there's a lot of low end and just rumble going on and just circling around in this big square before it, spills out. So we also have flown subs on this tour. So, that's something that plays a part each day. For me, a big thing that I'm adjusting daily is the EQ of my crowd mics. I'm trying to go out and make the sound of what the audience sound the same every day. A lot of managing low end. That's what I found is the big thing for me.
Acquiring all this gear, it's important to have a good supply. I know you use Full Compass. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. In my early days of working at the venue in the college, my role was putting gear quotes together, and it's very important to me that I had somebody at Full Compass that I could call, and just having that extra bit of like confidence that yeah this is good, or oh no, that's not going to work. You're going to need this piece instead. And so that's a very important thing to me.
It doesn't hurt to reach out, like if you have, especially with gear, we're like, is this card going to work, adapt to this system? Well, guys, I know you have a show to get to. Thank you so much for sitting with us. Lloyd and Connor, thank you very much. And check out Young the Giant. They're on tour right now. And as always, check out Waves, check out Alan and Heath, and shop right here at Full Compass. Follow us at Full Compass for more interviews, great interviews like this, gear reviews, and content for you, the pro. Thanks so much, guys. Good luck tonight.